Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to this quick Instagram live on forgiveness. As many of you know, I'm a spiritual success coach, and every month I cover a practical subject on how to use Islam to succeed. I think a lot of Muslims, we have a lot of knowledge, we know a lot of stuff about Islam, we know a lot of hadith, we know a lot of Quran, we know a lot of expressions, but where we really need to take it up a notch as a community is how do you go from talking about Islamic concepts to living them, right? And that's sort of the purpose of my program, is to help you take very simple Islamic concepts but implement them in your daily life to experience the success that you desire, which is the hard work, right? Otherwise everybody would do it. And so this month was on forgiveness. And I got a lot of comments on that, a lot of questions. Oftentimes, when it comes to forgiveness, it's very misunderstood in the Muslim community, and therefore we apply it incorrectly, and hence we don't see the results that we expect. Hey, I see my cousin from Algeria who just joined, so I said hi to him. But basically, when it comes to forgiveness, so all of us know that forgiveness is a tremendous skill to have. First and foremost for the hereafter, right? And that's wonderful because many hadith, many ayahs, you gain so much from forgiving. And in fact, right, I have a reel here on Instagram that shows like it's a small sample, 5 benefits from the Quran and the Sunnah on forgiveness. So it goes without saying there's benefits in the hereafter for forgiveness. But what people don't realize is that there are massive, massive benefits to forgiveness in this life. In this life right now. You don't have to wait until you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet we miss out on those opportunities. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I forgave that person. But it's not really true forgiveness. It's just lip service. We say it with our tongue, but we haven't internalized it in our hearts. And therefore, what that session helps people do is really practice true forgiveness to reap the rewards. So feel free to ask questions about forgiveness. I'll answer a few that people message me privately. But if you have any question as it comes up, please let me know here. But the key thing is, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is not to look the other way. It's not to just ignore what that person did to you, right? Forgiveness is not about condoning that person's actions or giving them punishment by withholding forgiveness. That is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is about getting over yourself, getting over my ego and its whispers, my nafs and its whispers, and find a way to get closer to Allah by overlooking what happened, by not attaching too much meaning to what happened with this other person, no matter how atrocious the transgression that person might have done for us. And forgiving doesn't mean to forget, right? You can forgive such that once you think about that incident, once you think about that person, there's no emotional content, okay? That's true forgiveness. So a lot of people ask me, well, I forgave that person for Allah's sake, but it still hurts. Well, then you haven't forgiven. Like, it should not hurt anymore. And basically, right, there's 3 stages to forgiveness. And Muslims don't do this, right? The first mistake that we make is that we say, I'm a good Muslim, I should forgive. Therefore, I should not feel upset at that person. I should not feel mad at that person. I should not feel resentful towards that person. And that's a mistake. It is okay to feel those feelings. Where we trip is not in feeling the negative feelings that are quote unquote un-Islamic, is when we act on them and when we harbor those feelings and they cause us to act in a less wholesome way, in an un-Islamic way, right? And that's what happens a lot of times. So for example, you don't forgive, say, your mother or a family member, for instance. And what does that cause you to do? You start acting weird. You don't act from a place of power. You don't act as a representative of Allah on earth, as an inheritor of the prophets, right? And that's where the losses start accumulating, right? So with the case of me having a conflict with a family member, instead of resolving the issue and forgiving them, they're two different things. You could resolve an issue from a practical stance, but not forgive them. Forgiveness is an internal job. It is just within yourself. You don't need to talk to that person. You need to see them. You don't have to. You can, but you don't have to do that way. You could just sit in your own space quietly and forgive somebody and go through a forgiveness exercise and reap the benefits of forgiveness. It has nothing to do with the other person. But if I don't work out my disagreement with my family member, I might cut the ties of the womb. And we know all the benefits of the ties of the womb, of maintaining the ties of the womb, right? And so that, for example, is one way that you are losing because we are not forgiving, okay? And so the first step is to process the feelings, acknowledge, validate your feelings. I feel hurt, I feel angry, I feel betrayed, whatever it is okay to feel those feelings. And this experience happened to elicit that feeling so that Allah can teach us something, that can move us forward in our lives. So that's one. Two, we have to accept our situation, right? We have to accept what happened. A lot of times Muslims ask the disempowering question. Why did this happen to me? Why me? What is this? Is Allah testing me? Is Allah punishing me? All these disempowering questions. Look, there's not the common thread across all of humanity is that we're going to face challenges. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or you don't even have a dime to your name. You're going to be tested in your relationships. You're going to be tested by your children. You're going to be tested in your wealth. You're going to be tested to different degrees, and it's going to manifest differently, but the underlying tone of that challenge is the same, regardless of class, race, religion, etc. It's the common denominator of the human experience. And so when something happens, the first thing that we have to realize is that nothing happens by chance, right? And so it's part of the divine plan, whatever that may be, and we for sure do not understand it as humans. So we need to process our feelings, accept our situation. There's a way of doing it without brushing things under the rug. And then three, we need to be grateful for this experience. And this is the hardest part. Most people can't get it, and I could not cross that chasm for a very, very long time until my wife coached me through that. And so I have a forgiveness exercise that walks you through these three phases, and we go over a concrete example in your life, etc. So check it out. I'm happy to send you the link for that session, inshallah. So, but that's the short thing about forgiveness. The last thing I'll say about forgiveness is that it might have two components. One, as I mentioned, is internal. It's just me forgiving, me releasing and freeing myself from the tyranny of the past, right? And that's the most important thing. That's where you see the most results. That's where your wealth increases. That's where your health improves. That's where relationships improve. That's where your worship deepens, right? That's the biggest benefit. Number two, you still get benefits from it, is to work out the issue with that person. Meaning, you might still have to interact with this person, right? You might have to learn from that experience. And so there is the outer world component that you need to process. But if you're trying to work on forgiveness, just work on the inner part first. All right, so I'll answer some questions now. Feel free to ask questions here. So one question I got is, well, how do I deal with forgiveness with my spouse? Right? Very good question, because here you have two components. You have the component that there is an issue, right? My husband does not respect me. My husband does not help me. My wife, crashed the car. Whatever it is, right? You have a dispute. But then you have to deal with this person. Like, I've been married to my wife for 15 years. We have disagreements, we have fights. But we still got stuff to do. We got children, we got a family, we got money, we have businesses, we have money to make, places to be, a legacy to build. So even though we might have differences, right, that require forgiveness, there's also the day-to-day building, keep the ship moving, right? So if this is the case, what you have to do is what I just mentioned earlier. You work on the forgiveness exercise internally on your own. Right? And that's the key. That's the power. You are submitting yourself to Allah's will. You are submitting yourself to the reality that Allah is the king, not you. Because when we get upset about events and how they turn out, we are tacitly saying that we know better than Allah. And that is not productive. It is not going to help you in your way to success. If you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to have a marriage, if you're trying to have beautiful children, trying to think that we know better than Allah is not a recipe for success. And then number two, you could discuss it with your spouse to confront that issue, right? And if somebody's a repeat offender, you have to stop the bleeding. Okay, you have to stop the bleeding, and you have to confront that situation. That is different than forgiveness. That is about speaking your power, and speaking your power, right, requires tremendous faith. It is not easy to speak your power. I always tell people the clearest sign of success for Muslims is to say what you mean and mean what you say. Sounds simple, but it's extremely difficult. But that's the example of our prophets. May Allah have peace and blessing upon them all. Okay, so confronting the repeat offender, working out the kinks of your relationship is separate from the forgiveness part. You forgive somebody for the transgression that they made here, but you still need to make the relationship work. You have to speak your truth. You might have to be prepared to walk away. That's part of it. Like, we need to stop the stigmatizing people removing themselves from toxic situations, marriages, relationships, works, jobs. It's not quitting. That is you mic dropping, in my opinion, because you are standing up in your power, inshallah. All right, so let's see if there's any other questions from here. Okay, so one question is, if I have felt that I've forgiven somebody, why does it still bother me? Why do the thoughts keep coming up? Right? So if thoughts, quote unquote, come up randomly, actually I have a call coming up soon, so we'll have to wrap it up. But if you have thoughts randomly coming up about a previous incident, that's two things. One, it could be just your mind running amok, right? So we don't want to keep replaying the past in our mind. It is not productive because you're just spinning your wheel. So it could be that your mind is just randomly picking random events. You know how like sometimes you're sitting and your mind will go to something embarrassing that happened when you were 7 years old and nobody remembers it but your mind, right? Don't give any energy to those thoughts. That one you just need to ignore and move on. It could be that you genuinely have forgiven. But most often, and this is from my own experience, I kept repeating the past because I hadn't forgiven. I was just stuck in a loop, right? And I share a lot of stories about this in my session and elsewhere. And in which case, right, you have to do the forgiveness exercise over and over and over again. You don't have to do my forgiveness exercise, but what I'm saying is that you need to dig deep. You have the answers within you. You're going to have to look inward and develop a process that allows you to acknowledge your feelings, honor them, respect them, accept your situation, and release, right? Whatever mechanisms, these 3 steps are going to have to be there. Okay? And so find what works for you and do it. See, a lot of people like get, oh, James, why are you asking me to do this exercise a million times? But guess what? I'm very active on LinkedIn. If I told somebody send 10,000 cold emails, right? They'll do it. People applying for jobs, applying for 100 jobs, random, just applying all the time. Nonsense. Like any job that under the sun, they submit their CV and submit a cover letter, right? Complete waste of time, but they do it. Why? Because they love simple, but like easy and complicated things. Like it's just a lot of steps and it's just mindless doing the work. I'm saying just pause, but a lot of people have resistance to pause and do the inner work. But that's what gets you results. Okay? I'll give you just one example of how success comes from forgiveness. I used to be a graduate student many, many years ago, a decade ago, even more than a decade ago. I was just gotten married. And for 4 years, I got nothing. I was going to graduate school, making no progress for 4 years, just spinning my wheels with this advisor, jerking me around, whatever, okay? So I was very resentful towards this person. I felt that they sabotaged me. My career was being wasted. My potential was being wasted. I was making $20,000 a year. I had a baby on the way. I had just gotten married to Zahra. And I was very resentful. Then I decided to let it go. I was like, why am I poisoning my mind? Why is this person living rent-free in my head? And it's not doing anything to them, right? Like, it's not hurting them, but it's hurting me. So let me let go. So that's how I started releasing. I forgave this person. I moved on. And guess what? Took me 4 years, got nothing done, right? I switched advisors, forgave this person. I finished my PhD in 18 months, and my PhD won Best PhD Award. I went from being the worst graduate student to the best graduate student in these vanity metrics, of course, in 18 months because I forgave. And in that period, as I said, I was making $20,000 a year. I got a job in Norway. I was making close to $100,000 a year, 5x what I was making while still being a graduate student. Nothing changed. The same responsibilities, the same job, 5xing my income. Lived in Norway, beautiful place, got to travel, got to see nature, got to experience a different country, etc., etc. And so forgiveness gets you results in this world. I've seen people who released forgiveness and got physical pain removed from them, made more money, felt more fulfilled, slept better. Just so many worldly benefits that you don't have to wait until you die to reap them. So let me see how much. Okay, I still have about 5 minutes. So if anybody else has a question, feel free to post it here in the chat. Should we forgive and forget? No. So we shouldn't forgive and forget in the sense that you erase the experience from your mind. Again, everything happens for a reason. So you forgive in the sense that when you think about that incident, it does not hurt anymore. And a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it is about forgiving yourself. The biggest tyrant in your life is not the government, it's not your ex, it's not your employer. Most of the time, it's us being the biggest tyrant against ourselves. Our mind is the biggest tyrant over our hearts. And so a lot of times it's about forgiving ourselves. I have another coaching program where we have the self-forgiveness guided meditation, the self-forgiveness modules, because it is a series, like that's all the work. That's all the work. Once you are your own best friend, right? Now you have almost this amazing wingman next to you, always being supporting you. Okay? And so first step is always self-forgiveness. So, but in general, we shouldn't forgive and forget in the sense that we want to forgive, we want to release, we want to, basically it's like dropping the weight so we could elevate higher like a hot air balloon. But we don't want to forget. You don't want to repeat the same mistake, right? There is going to be some wisdom, some lesson that is going to be gleaned from this experience, no matter how dark it is. And it could be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. You turn back like, wow, that thing that happened to me 10 years ago, holy cow, that was for X, Y, Z, right? You never know, right? There's an expression, I don't know who said it, but they said, once you die, if you were to watch your life from the time that you died until you were born, right, in reverse, now that everything has been written and you've lived out your life, you will live your life exactly as it played out, because Allah is the best of planners. Again, I don't know who said that saying, but it resonates with me. And even though sometimes I might not be happy with how things are shaken up in the moment, I know once you step back and you look at the bigger picture, especially when you take into life as an eternity in Jannah, inshallah, everything is going to be working out fine. So no, we don't forgive and forget. One last question maybe for the road. Let's see. Yeah, I have about 3 more minutes. A quick one, ideally, nothing too deeply philosophical. All right, I don't see any questions right now. My next session is going to be in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be about decision making, which goes directly with the forgiveness. As I mentioned before, a lot of times when we don't forgive, we start acting weird. We start acting in a suboptimal way that starts just degrading our performance, which starts hurting us in the long term, right? So for example, this happens a lot in jobs. So you go to a job, you're super excited about a job, you love it, right? But then once the job starts, it's not as cracked up as advertised. You know, your boss is taking advantage of you, you're underpaid, underappreciated, the company is not doing what they claim to be doing, et cetera, right? And so you start checking out, right? I think that's what quiet quitting is. I don't know if that's what it is, but you know, like basically you lower your performance, you lower your standards because of what's happening around you, right? Because you're disappointed, because you are resentful towards that company. And instead of forgiving them and processing that and maintaining your standards high, we lower our standards, we lower our ihsan. And that's where we start slipping. That's where we start hurting our career, our revenue, our money. Because once you lower your performance, now you're not performing highly. Why would somebody else hire you, right? Why would somebody else recommend you? So we need to keep our ihsan high, regardless of what's happening around, and forgiveness is a tool for that. And so next month, I'll be talking about decision making, because a lot of Muslims make a lot of poor decisions. Again, despite we have tools, we have istikhara, we have dua al-hajjah, we have so many tools, but again, we don't know how to use them properly. We don't have to know how to use them in a holistic way to get what we want. And that's why I see so many Muslims just running around in circles, right? Because they are not using the Islamic tools in a sound, prophetic, and optimal way. And I'm going to show you how to do that, inshallah, for decision making. So let me know, ping me inshallah if you want to do more of these lives. But the key thing is forgive, forgive, forgive. It is not about the other person. Forgiveness is an internal job. It's just you against you. If you forgive somebody, they are not better than you. You are not better than them. They didn't get the best of you. They didn't get away with it. Whatever is destined for them is going to come to them regardless of what you do or do not do. And likewise, that person could not have hurt you unless Allah willed it. And so, forgive, 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 and see the benefits right now. Better wealth, better relationship, better health, better peace of mind, better sleep, etc., etc. All right? Thank you so much for tuning in, inshallah. I think this will post directly into my account. I hope it does, if you were able to join live. And check out my session on forgiveness, inshallah, and I'll see you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.